I wasn't 100% sure that was going to happen, but at that point I would have accepted whatever assignment I got, obviously, since I had no real say in the matter. Getting the actual assignment was the opposite of dramatic. They brought us into a big classroom and handed out paper with our orders. I got my top choice, Team 3. Love. Something else happened to me that spring that had an enormous impact not just on my military career, but on my life. I fell in love. I don't know if you believe in love at first sight. I don't think I did before the night in April of 2001 when I saw Taya standing at a bar in a San Diego club, talking with one of my friends. She had a way of making black leather pants look smoking hot and classy. The combination suited me fine. I just joined Team 3. We hadn't started training yet, and I was enjoying what amounted to a week of vacation before getting down to the serious business of becoming a SEAL and earning my place on the team. Taya was working for a pharmaceutical company as a drug rep when we met. Originally from Oregon, she'd gone to college in Wisconsin and moved out to the coast a couple of years before we met. My first impression was that she was beautiful, even if she looked pissed off about something. When we started talking, I also found out she was smart and had a good sense of humor. I sensed right away she was someone who could keep up with me. But maybe she should tell the story. Her version sounds better than mine. Taya. I remember the night we met. Some of it, at least. I wasn't going to go out. This was all during a low spot in my life. My days were spent in a job I didn't like. I was fairly new in town and still looking for some solid female friendships. And I was casually dating guys with not much success. Over the years, I had some decent relationships and a couple of bad ones, with a few dates in between. I remember literally praying to God before I met Chris just to send me a nice guy. Nothing else mattered, I thought. I just prayed for someone who was inherently good and nice. A girlfriend called and wanted to go down to San Diego. I was living in Long Beach at the time, about 90 miles away. I wasn't going to go, but somehow she talked me into it. We were walking around that night, and we passed a bar named Maloney's. They were blaring Land Down Under by Man at Work. My friend wanted to go in, but they had an outrageous cover charge, something like 10 or 15 bucks. I'm not doing that, I told her. Not for a bar that's playing Men at Work. Oh, shut up, my girlfriend said. She paid the cover, and in we went. We were at the bar. I was drinking and irritable. This tall, good-looking guy came over and started talking to me. I'd been talking to one of his friends, who seemed like a jerk. My mood was still pretty bad, though he had a certain air about him. He told me his name was Chris, and I told him mine. What do you do? I asked. Drive an ice cream truck. You're full of shit, I told him. Obviously, you're military. No, he protested. He told me a bunch of other things. SEALs almost never admit to strangers what they really do. And Chris had some of the best BS stories ever. One of the better ones was Dolphin Waxer. He claimed that dolphins in captivity needed to be waxed so their skin didn't disintegrate. It's a pretty convincing story, if you're a young, naive, and tipsy girl. Fortunately, he didn't try that particular one on me. I hope because he could tell I wouldn't fall for it. He also convinced girls that he mans an ATM machine, sitting inside and doling out money when people put their cards in. I wasn't anywhere near that naive or drunk for him to try that story. One look at him and I could have told he was military. He was ripped and had short hair and had an accent that said, "Not from here." Finally, he admitted he was in the service. So, what do you do in the military, I asked. He said a bunch of other things, and finally I got the truth. Just graduated from BUD/S. I was like, okay, so you're a SEAL. Yeah. I know all about you guys, I told him. You see, my sister had just divorced her husband. My brother-in-law had wanted to be a SEAL. He'd gone through some of the training. And so I knew, or thought I did, what SEALs were all about. So I told Chris. You're arrogant, self-centered, and glory-seeking, I said. You lie and think you can do whatever you want. Yes, I was at my charming best. What was intriguing was how he responded. He didn't smirk or get clever or even act offended. He seemed truly puzzled. "Why would you say that?" he asked, very innocently and genuine. I told him about my brother-in-law. "I would lay down my life for my country," he answered. "How is that self-centered? That's the opposite." He was so idealistic and romantic about things like patriotism and serving the country that I couldn't help but believe him. We talked for a while more. Then my friend came over and I turned my attention to her. Chris said something like he was going to go home. "Why?" I asked. "Well, you were saying about how you never would date a SEAL or go out with one." "Oh no, I said I would never marry one. I didn't say I wouldn't go out with one." His face lit up. "In that case," he said, with that sly little smile he has, "I guess I'll get your phone number." He hung around, I hung around. We were still there at last call. As I got up with the crowd to go, I was pushed against him. He was all hard and muscly and smelled good. So I gave him a little kiss on the neck. We went out and he walked us to the parking lot. And I started puking my brains out from all the scotch on the rocks I'd been drinking. How can you not love a girl who loses it the first time you meet? I knew from the start that this was someone I wanted to spend a lot of time with. But at first, it was impossible to do that. I called her the morning after we met to make sure she was okay. We talked and laughed a bit. After that, I'd call her and leave messages. She didn't call back. The other guys on the team started ribbing me about it. They were betting about whether she'd ever call me on her own. You see, we talked a few times when she would actually answer the phone, maybe thinking it was someone else. After a while, it was obvious even to me that she never initiated. Then something changed. I remember the first time she called me. We were on the East Coast training. When we were done talking, I ran inside and started jumping on my teammates' beds. I took the call as a sign she was really interested. I was happy to share that fact with all the naysayers. Taya. Chris was always very aware of my feelings. He's extremely observant in general, and it is the same with his awareness of my emotions. He doesn't have to say much. A simple question or easy way of bringing something to light reveals that he is 100% aware of my feelings. He doesn't necessarily enjoy talking about feelings, but he has a sense of when it is appropriate or necessary to bring things out that I may have been intent on keeping in. I noticed it early on in our relationship. We'd be talking on the phone, and he was very caring. We are, in many ways, opposites. Still, we seem to click. One day on the phone, he was asking what I thought made us compatible. I decided to tell him some of the things that drew me to him. "I think you're a really good guy," I told him. "Really nice and sensitive." "Sensitive?" He was shocked and sounded offended. "What do you mean? You don't know what sensitive means? You mean like I go around crying at movies and stuff?" I laughed. I explained that I meant that he seemed to pick up on how I was feeling, sometimes before I did. And he let me express that emotion and, importantly, gave me space. I don't think that's the image most people have of SEALs, but it was and is accurate, at least of this one. September 11th, 2001. As our relationship got closer and closer, Taya and I started spending more time with each other. Finally, we'd spent nights at each other's apartments, either in Long Beach or San Diego. I woke up one morning to her yelling, Chris, wake up! You gotta see this!" I stumbled into the living room. Taya had turned on the television and jacked the volume. I saw smoke pouring out of the World Trade Center in New York. I didn't understand what all was happening. Part of me was still sleeping. Then, as we watched, an airplane flew right into the side of the second tower. "Motherfuckers," I muttered. I stared at the screen, angry and confused, not entirely sure it was real. Suddenly, I remembered that I left my cell phone off. I grabbed it and saw I missed a bunch of messages. The sum total of them was this: "Kyle, get your ass back to base now." I grabbed Taya's SUV. It had plenty of gas and my truck didn't, and hauled down to the base. I don't know exactly how fast I was going. It might have been 3 digits, but it was certainly a high rate of speed. Down around San Juan Capistrano, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a set of red lights flashing. I pulled over. The cop who came up to the truck was pissed. "Is there any reason you're going so fast?" he demanded. "Yes, sir," I told him. "I apologize. I'm in the military and I just got recalled. I understand you gotta write me a ticket. I know I was in the wrong, but with all due respect, can you just hurry and give me the ticket so I can get back to base?" "What branch are you in?" Motherfucker, I thought. I just told you I have to report. Can't you just give me the damn ticket? But I kept my cool. "I'm in the Navy," I told him. "What do you do in the Navy?" he asked. By now I was pretty annoyed. "I'm a SEAL." He closed the ticket book. "I'll take you to City Line," he told me. "Go get some fucking payback." He put his lights on and pulled out in front of me. We went a bit slower than I'd been going when he nabbed me, but it was still well past the limit. He took me as far as his jurisdiction went, maybe a little further, then waved me on. Training. We were put on immediate standby, but it would turn out that we weren't needed in Afghanistan or anywhere else at the moment. My platoon would have to wait roughly a year before we got into action. And when we did, it would be against Saddam Hussein, not Osama bin Laden. There's a lot of confusion in the civilian world about SEALs and our mission. Most people think we're strictly sea-based commandos, meaning that we always operate off ships and hit targets on the water or the immediate coastline. Admittedly, a fair amount of our work involves things at sea. We are in the Navy, after all. And from a historical perspective, as briefly mentioned earlier, SEALs trace their origins to the Navy's Underwater Demolition Teams, or UDTs, established during World War II. UDT frogmen were responsible for reconning beaches before they were hit, and they trained for a variety of other waterborne tasks, such as infiltrating harbors and planting limpet mines on enemy ships. They were the mean, badass combat divers of World War II and the post-war era, and SEALs are proud to carry on in their wake. But as the UDT mission expanded, the Navy recognized that the need for special operations didn't end at the beach line. As new units called SEALs were formed and trained for this expanded mission, they came to replace the older UDT units. While land may be the final word in the SEAL acronym, it's hardly the last thing we do. Every special operations unit in the U.S. military has its own specialty. There's a lot of overlap in our training, and the range of our missions is similar in many respects, but each branch has its own expertise. Army Special Forces, also known as SF, does an excellent job training foreign forces, both in conventional and unconventional warfare. Army Rangers are a big assault force. If you want a large target, say an airfield taken down, that's their thing. Air Force Special Operators, parajumpers, excel at pulling people out of the shit. Among our specialties are DAs. DA stands for Direct Action. A direct action mission is a very short, quick strike against a small but high-value target. You might think of it as a surgical strike against the enemy. In a practical sense, it could range from anything like an attack on a key bridge behind enemy lines to a raid on a terrorist hideout to arrest a bomb maker. A snatch and grab, as some call it. While those are very different missions, the idea is the same. Strike hard and fast before the enemy knows what's going on. After 9/11, SEALs began training to deal with the places Islamic terrorists were most likely to be located. Afghanistan, number one, and then the Middle East and Africa. We still did all the things a SEAL is supposed to do, diving, jumping out of planes, taking down ships, etc. But there was more emphasis on land warfare during our workup than there traditionally had been in the past. There was a debate about this shift far above my pay grade. Some people wanted to limit SEALs to 10 miles inland. Nobody asked my opinion, but as far as I'm concerned, there shouldn't be any limits. Personally, I'm just as happy to stay out of the water, but that's besides the point. Let me do what I'm trained to do, wherever it needs to be done. The training, most of it anyway, was fun, even when it was a kick in the balls. We dove, we went into the desert, we worked in the mountains, we even got waterboarded and gassed. Everybody gets waterboarded during training. The idea is to prepare you in case you're captured. The instructors tortured us as hard as they could, tying us up and pounding on us, just short of permanently damaging us. They say each of us has a breaking point, and that prisoners eventually give in, but I would have done my best to make them kill me before I gave up secrets. Gas training was another kick. Basically, you get hit with CS gas and have to fight through it. CS gas is captor spray, or tear gas. The active ingredient is 2-chlorobenzyl malonitrile, for all you chemistry majors. We thought of it as cough and spit, because that's the best way to deal with it. You learn during training to let your eyes run. The worst thing to do is rub them. You're going to get snotty, and you're going to be coughing and crying, but you can still shoot your weapon and fight through it. That's the point of the exercise. We went up to Kodiak, Alaska, where we did a land navigation course. It wasn't the height of winter, but there was still so much snow on the ground that we had to put on snowshoes. We started with basic instruction on keeping warm, layering up, etc., and learned about things like snow shelters. One of the important points of this training, which applied everywhere, was learning how to conserve weight in the field. You have to figure out whether it's more important to be lighter and more mobile, or to have more ammunition and body armor. I prefer lightness and speed. I count ounces when we go out, not pounds. The lighter you are, the more mobile you become. The little bastards out there are faster than hell. You need every advantage you can get on them. The training was pretty competitive. We found out at one point that the best platoon in the team would be shipped out to Afghanistan. Training picked up from that point on. It was a fierce competition, and not just out on the training range. The officers were backstabbing each other. They'd go to the CEO and dime each other out. "Did you see what those guys did on the range? They're no good." The competition came down to us and one other platoon. We came in second. They went to war, we stayed home. That's about the worst fate a SEAL can imagine. With the conflict in Iraq looming on the horizon, our emphasis shifted. We practiced fighting in the desert. We practiced fighting in cities. We worked hard. There were always lighter moments. I remember one time when we were on a rut, real urban training. Our command would find a municipality that was willing to have us come in and take down an actual building. An empty warehouse, say, or a house. Something a little more authentic than you would find on a base. On this one exercise, we were working at a house. Everything had been carefully arranged with the local police department. A few actors had been recruited to play parts during the exercise. My role was to pull security outside. I blocked out traffic, waving vehicles away as some of the local cops watched from the sidelines. While I was standing there, gun out, not looking particularly friendly, this guy walked down the block toward me. I started going through the drill. First, I waved him off. He kept coming. Then I shined my light on him. He kept coming. I put my laser dot on him. He kept coming. Of course, the closer he got, the more convinced I was that he was a role player sent to test me. I mentally reviewed my ROEs, rules of engagement, which covered how I was supposed to act. "What are you, the Popo?" he asked, sticking his face out toward mine. Popo, a thug's term for police, wasn't in the ROEs, but I figured he was ad-libbing. The next thing on my list was to throw him down, so I did. He started to resist and reached under his jacket for what I assumed was a weapon, which is exactly what a SEAL playing a bad guy would do, so I reacted in kind, giving a good SEAL response as I wrestled him into the dirt and busted him up a bit. Whatever was under his jacket broke and liquid went everywhere. He was cussing and carrying on, but I didn't take the time to think about all that just then. As the fight ran out of him, I cuffed him and looked around. The cops, seated in their patrol car nearby, were just about doubled over laughing. I went over to see what was up. "That's so-and-so," they told me, "one of the biggest drug dealers in the city. Wish we could have beat him like you just did." Apparently, Mr. Popo ignored all the signs and wandered into the training exercise figuring he'd carry on business as usual. There are idiots everywhere. But I guess that explains how he got into that line of work in the first place. Hazed and hitched. For months, the United Nations Security Council pressured Iraq to comply fully with UN resolutions, especially those requiring inspections of suspected weapons of mass destruction and related sites. War wasn't a foregone conclusion. Saddam Hussein could have complied and shown inspectors everything they wanted to see, but most of us knew he wouldn't. So when we got the word that we were shipping out to Kuwait, we were excited. We figured we were going to war. One way or the other, there was plenty to do there. Besides watching Iraq's borders and protecting the Kurdish minority, who Saddam had gassed and massacred in the past, U.S. troops were enforcing no-fly zones in the north and south. Saddam was smuggling oil and other items both into and out of his country, in violation of the UN sanctions. The U.S. and other allies were stepping up operations to stop that. Before we deployed, Taya and I chose to get married. The decision surprised both of us. One day we started talking in the car and both came to the conclusion that we should get married. The decision stunned me, even as I made it. I agreed with it. It was completely logical. We were definitely in love. I knew she was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. And yet, for some reason, I didn't think the marriage would last. We both knew that there is an extremely high divorce rate in the SEALs. As a matter of fact, I've heard marriage counselors claim that it is close to 95%, and I believe it. So maybe that was what worried me. Perhaps part of me wasn't really ready to think about a lifetime commitment. And of course, I understood how demanding my job was going to be once we went to war. I can't explain the contradictions. But I do know that I was absolutely in love, and that she loved me. And so for better or worse, make that peace or war, marriage was our next step together. Happily, we survived it all. One thing you ought